You know, every time I smell cinnamon and warm apples, that sweet, soft smell of a pie just pulled out the oven, I go right back to the summer of '58. Isn't that funny? How a smell can carry your whole body back in time, like a leaf caught in the wind. Lord have mercy, I can almost hear the screen door slam shut, the fan turning lazy circles overhead, and the sound of my mama humming a hymn in the kitchen. Blessed assurance, she always sang that one on Sundays. But that particular Sunday, well, that one was different. Now, I don't talk about this much. Not because I've forgotten, oh no. Some things stay with you no matter how old you get. They settle deep like roots. And some nights, when it's quiet and the house creaks like it's remembering too, I sit with my tea and think, what if I'd said no? What if I'd let the truth come out back then? But we didn't do that in those days. We swallowed things. We made do. That's just how it was. I'll tell you what, folks, today, you got choices. You got voices. Back then, silence was how you survived. I was folding laundry the other day, just some pillowcases and a blouse that still smells like the old cedar chest, and I found this little photograph. Black and white, edges curled like dried petals. It was my wedding day. Me and Frank Morrison, standing there like strangers at a train station. And right behind us, my brother Ray, smiling with his mouth but not with his eyes. He was holding my bouquet 'cause I couldn't stop shaking. And when I touched that photo, it was like my hand brushed against the whole memory, and it all came rushing back. The church, the heat, the quiet, the lie. You see, there's a story I've kept to myself for many, many years. A story not about scandal, not really, not even about shame. It's a story about love, about what you're willing to give up when the person you love has no one else left to protect him. And honey, I was just a girl, 17. I still had freckles and calluses on my fingers from picking beans behind the house. But that summer I grew up overnight. Sometimes, I wonder why it's haunting me more now. Maybe 'cause I'm older and closer to the place where the past starts catching up with you. Or maybe it's because my granddaughter asked me the other week, "Grandma, have you ever been in love?" And I couldn't say yes. Not really. Not the way she meant. So instead, I just smiled and told her I once baked a pie so good, it made a boy cry. But love? Real love? Mine looked different. I reckon I'm telling this now because it's been sitting heavy in my chest. And maybe, just maybe, it's time I handed the story over. Not because I need forgiveness or sympathy, but because someone out there, maybe even you, needs to hear what it means to carry someone else's secret like it was stitched into your own skin. What it means to love so much, you give up the life you dreamed of, just to make sure theirs wouldn't be taken away. So, if you'll stay with me a while, I'll tell you how one summer afternoon in 1958, in a town so small the gossip traveled faster than the mail, I walked down the aisle not for love, but for family, for survival, for Ray. And before this day is done, I want you to ask yourself something real hard. If the person you loved most in this world was in danger, what would you be willing to sacrifice to keep them safe? Back in my day, life moved a little slower, not 'cause folks were lazy, mind you, but 'cause the world itself felt smaller, simpler. I was just a girl then, maybe 10 or 11, living in that little town of Jonesboro, Arkansas, a place where everybody knew your name, and if they didn't, well, they'd make sure to learn it soon enough. Our days started with the rooster's crow and ended with the cricket song, and Sundays were a sacred affair. Church was more than a building, it was the heart of our community. Mama and Daddy worked hard, raising me and Ray in a house that smelled of fresh pine and homemade bread. I remember mornings when the sun would peek through the kitchen window just right, casting golden ribbons on the worn wooden table where Mama poured coffee and buttered biscuits. We didn't have much, land sakes alive, We didn't have a pot to pee in most days, but we made do with what we had. That was just the way things were back then. There was a rhythm to life, steady and sure, even if it was humble. I was shy, yes, but curious as a cat. I'd spend afternoons wandering the fields behind our house, chasing butterflies, or sitting under the big oak tree with a book in my lap. Books were my escape. They took me to places I couldn't go otherwise, and they gave me dreams, dreams bigger than Jonesboro's dusty streets. I believed, with all my heart, that kindness was the most important thing you could offer the world. Mama said it was the glue holding us all together. And I believed people always came back to what was good, even if sometimes they had to lose their way first. Ray was my hero, no two ways about it. For years older, but he never acted like he was better than me. He'd protect me from the neighborhood boys who teased me for being the quiet one, and he had this way of making me laugh when I thought the world was too much to handle. He was the heart of our little family, the steady hand when storms blew in. When he left for the Air Force, I felt like a part of me left with him. Those days were innocent, but even then, I sensed there was something unsaid, a quiet weight pressing down on our family. My parents never talked about it, and Ray just smiled that gentle smile and told me not to worry. But sometimes, late at night, I'd hear hushed voices, or catch a look between Mama and Daddy that said things I didn't understand. Still, I dreamed. I dreamed of love, of a simple life filled with laughter and light. I thought maybe I'd marry a kind man, have children of my own, and live on a porch just like the one I'm sitting on now, watching the sun set over these same Arkansas hills. I thought love would be easy. I thought the world would always be kind. But you young folks wouldn't understand. Life has a way of twisting those dreams, of testing what you're made of. And sometimes, the love you think you want isn't the love you need. Looking back, I realized those early days built the woman I became. A woman who learned that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's quiet, like holding a secret so big, it nearly breaks your heart, but you keep it anyway, for the ones you love. That was me then, a girl with freckles, wide eyes, and a heart full of hope. And even though the road ahead was rocky, I carried that hope with me like a lantern in the dark. Now, I'll tell you something, life has a funny way of showing you what's real when you least expect it. One ordinary afternoon in late June '58, just as the summer sun was starting to make the cotton fields shimmer, something came into our home that no one was ready for. A letter. Not just any letter, but one that felt heavier than all the weight we'd been carrying for years. Mama was in the kitchen, humming one of her old hymns, when Daddy came in from the mailbox, wiping his hands on his trousers like he'd seen a ghost. I was sitting on the porch steps, watching the dust swirl in the breeze, and I saw his face. It wasn't angry or scared, but worried. Real worried. Land sakes alive, I didn't know a letter could hold so much trouble. He handed it to Mama, and her hands started to tremble. "It's from the base," she whispered, like the walls might listen. I didn't understand why they were so quiet all of a sudden. I remember that moment like it was yesterday, the air thick and heavy, the sky suddenly gray, even though the sun was still high. My heart started to beat a little faster, and I looked at Ray, who was just coming in from the barn. He caught my eye and gave me a small, sad smile. That was the first time I saw that something was wrong. But I was just a girl, what did I know? I wasn't prepared for what came next. Mama read the letter aloud, her voice shaking like a leaf in the wind. It said Ray had been accused of conduct unbecoming an airman, a phrase so cold it felt like ice in my chest. Back then, that meant one thing: trouble. Big trouble. And the kind you couldn't talk your way out of. The base was threatening to kick him out, and if that happened, well, the whole town would know. The shame would fall on all of us like a dark cloud. I remember my mother turning to me, her eyes wet but fierce. "Jeannie, You have to help. This family needs you." I didn't fully understand what she meant yet, but I could see in her face that there was no choice. That was when the weight settled on my young shoulders, a burden too big for a 17-year-old, but there it was. Ray was quiet about it. He never complained or begged. He just looked at me with those soft eyes that held so much more than words could say. I felt my heart clench, not knowing how to fix what was breaking inside him. I wanted to protect him the way he always protected me, but how could I when the whole world was closing in? That night I lay awake, listening to the cicadas sing their endless song, wondering what the future held. I didn't know then that the decisions made in that house over the next few days would shape the rest of my life. That this little letter, just a few lines of typed words, would be the spark that changed everything. I couldn't explain why my chest felt tight, or why tears came when I thought no one was watching. But I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. Looking back, I see that moment as the turning point. It was the beginning of the secret we'd carry, the silent pact to keep Ray safe at any cost. And for me, it was the start of a journey I never asked for, one of sacrifice, courage, and a love that went beyond what I thought was possible. I'll be honest with you, honey, at that time, I was scared. Scared of what might happen to Ray, scared of the whispers that would spread like wildfire, scared of losing my brother to a world that wouldn't understand him. But more than anything, I felt this fierce, burning need to do something. To be strong. To be his shield. That's the thing about family, sometimes you're called on to carry the heaviest burdens quietly. And sometimes, the greatest love is the kind that nobody sees. Land sakes alive, I never imagined how heavy silence could be until those days came crashing down on us. What started as a quiet worry turned into a storm that shook the very ground beneath my feet. You see, when that letter arrived, it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was like a noose tightening around our family's neck, and suddenly nothing felt safe anymore. The town whispered. Oh, how they whispered. You young folks might not understand, but in a place like Jonesboro back then, gossip spread faster than wildfire, and once a rumor got started, it stuck to you like glue. I remember walking down Main Street, feeling eyes on my back, hearing muffled talks behind closed doors. Poor girl, some said. What kind of family hides secrets like that? Others would clutch their pearls or cross themselves. That kind of shame was poison, and it wasn't just for Ray, it was for all of us. At home, things got harder by the day. Mama tried to keep the peace, baking her pies and humming the same old hymns, but I could see the cracks beneath her smile. Daddy, bless his soul, grew quieter, more distant. He'd come home late from the mill, tired and heavy with things he didn't say out loud. And me? Well, I was just a girl caught in the middle of it all, feeling like a shadow in my own life. Inside, I was a mess. I had this storm of feelings swirling, fear that my brother might be taken from us, shame that our family wasn't normal, and anger too. Oh yes, anger. Anger at the world that refused to accept Ray for who he was, and anger at myself for not knowing how to fix it. I couldn't tell a soul. There was no one to turn to. You young folks wouldn't understand, Mama would say, and I believed her. But that made me feel all alone. One night, after dinner, I found myself crying in my room, hiding behind the faded curtains. I didn't know how to say what I felt. I was scared that if I let anyone see my tears, they'd think I was weak. But Lord have mercy, the weight of it all was nearly too much. I wanted to scream, to run away, to tell the world to mind its own business. But instead, I stayed quiet and prayed for strength. The hardest part, nobody really talked about what was happening. It was like we were all pretending, playing roles in a terrible play we didn't choose. The fear of losing Ray wasn't just about him, it was about what losing him would mean for all of us. Would the neighbors stop inviting us to Sunday dinners? Would the church turn its back? Would we be shunned, cast out like sinners? In the middle of that silence, the pressure started to build. Mama and Daddy began to talk in hushed voices, casting quick glances my way. I knew they were wrestling with a plan, something I was only just beginning to understand. That's when the weight shifted from sadness to a heavy, stubborn knot of responsibility. I was told I had to marry Frank Morrison. Frank, a quiet man, as reserved as a church mouse who kept his own secrets close. They said it would keep the family safe, keep the scandal buried deep beneath the Sunday hymns and the freshly baked pies. I didn't know much about Frank back then, only that he was no spring chicken and came from a good family, the kind that prided themselves on appearances and keeping their troubles inside. At first, I felt numb. How could this be happening to me? I was barely a woman, and now they wanted me to give up my dreams, my freedom, to play a part in a lie. Part of me wanted to fight to say no, to run away, but another part, the part that loved Ray with every ounce of my being, knew I had no choice. That's how we did it in those days. You sacrificed for family, even if it meant losing a piece of yourself. There were moments, though, when Frank surprised me. He didn't ask much, didn't pressure or push. It was almost as if he was as trapped as I was, caught in a role written by others. Still, the thought of spending my life beside a man I didn't love felt like a slow kind of death. But I told myself we made do with what we had. That was the only way forward. Looking back, I can see now how tangled the web was, the outside world judging us, the family's fears, and my own heart breaking quietly in the dark. The burden was heavy, and I carried it alone. But even then, I held on to a small flicker of hope that somehow all this sacrifice would keep Ray safe. That somehow love could wear many faces, even ones you didn't expect. I remember that day like it was etched in my bones. Like the whole world held its breath, and the clock stopped ticking just for a moment, long enough for me to feel the weight of every choice I'd ever made crashing down all at once. Land sakes alive, I never thought a moment could feel so heavy. It was late summer, 1958, not long after the wedding. The air was thick with heat, and the cicadas were singing their usual song like nothing was wrong. But inside me, inside my heart, everything was breaking. I had been playing my part, walking the fine line of the secret we all kept, pretending that the quiet life with Frank was enough. But that day, the fragile balance shattered. I got a call from Mama. Her voice was trembling, the kind of voice that sends chills down your spine. "Jeannie," she said, "you need to come home. Now." I didn't ask why. I just knew something was wrong. When I walked through that door, I saw it all, the fear in Daddy's eyes, the pale face of my brother Ray. He looked so tired, but his smile was there, faint but real. He pulled me into a hug, but I could feel his hands shaking. Then Mama whispered the words no one ever wants to hear: "Ray's been discharged." They found out, Jeannie. They know. In that moment, it felt like the ground fell out from beneath me. The brother who had been my protector, my heart, was being ripped away by a world that refused to understand him. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body froze. Time stopped. I remember looking at Ray's face, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of his pain, the loneliness, the fear, the shame forced upon him. And in that moment, I realized something so heavy it nearly crushed me. No matter how much I loved him, no matter how fiercely I'd tried to shield him, I couldn't protect him from the world's cruelty. I lost my brother that day, not a death, but to a life shadowed by silence and fear. That was the breaking point for me. The moment when pretending was no longer enough. When the life I'd imagined, the sweet dreams of love and happiness, slipped away like smoke through my fingers. I saw clearly that the choice I'd made, to marry Frank and keep the secret, was both a gift and a prison. I had traded my own chance at happiness to keep Ray safe, but in doing so, I lost pieces of myself I never got back. There were tears, oh, the tears I shed in that room. Tears for Ray, for the life stolen from him. Tears for myself, for the girl who had to grow up too fast and carry burdens no one her age should bear. I wanted to hold on to hope, but the future looked dark, like a long night with no dawn in sight. And yet, even in that darkest hour, I found a kind of strength I didn't know I had. Because love isn't always loud or bright. Sometimes, it's the quiet promise to stand by someone when the world turns its back. It's the courage to carry a secret that could break you, but you hold it anyway, for family, for loyalty, for heart. That day changed me. It carved a line between who I was and who I had to become. And though the pain never fully left me, it taught me what true love means, sacrifice without regret. I carry that day with me, every time I look at old photographs or smell that scent of apple pie. It reminds me that love isn't always easy, and sometimes it asks for the hardest things. But it's still love. And that, my dear, is a story worth telling. Lord have mercy, after that day, the world felt different, colder somehow, like the warmth had slipped away with the sunlight. I reckon I never truly understood what loss meant until I watched my brother slip away, not gone from this earth, but gone from the life we knew, from the family we had tried so hard to hold together. After the storm of that terrible news, there was silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind that fills a room and settles deep in your bones. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, but that quiet never quite left me. I found myself moving through the motions, waking up each morning and setting the table, folding laundry, keeping the house just so, because that's what you do when you're holding on by a thread. Frank and I lived together under the same roof, but it was like we were shadows sharing a space. No laughter, no touches, just the sound of two lives passing in the same room, but never really meeting. Inside, I felt hollow. The dreams I once had, the hopes that had danced like fireflies in the night, flickered and dimmed. I kept asking myself, who am I now? What's left of the girl who believed in kindness and love? That girl felt lost, swallowed by the weight of secrets and sacrifice. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch, clutching a cup of cold tea, watching the sun dip below the horizon, wondering if the world would ever be kind again. The faith I held onto so tightly, the belief that people always come back to good, it felt shaky, like a candle fighting against the wind. I prayed, yes, but the answers were quiet, and sometimes I thought maybe I'd lost my way. Frank was quiet too. I reckon he was carrying his own pain, his own secrets that neither of us spoke about. We were two souls bound together by a promise no one else understood, sharing a silence heavier than words. There were no fights, no harsh words, just a stillness that filled the spaces where love might have lived. But even in that emptiness, I found a strange kind of strength. Because living through such silence teaches you things about endurance, about what it means to carry on even when your heart feels like it's breaking. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply to keep breathing, to keep waking up and putting one foot in front of the other. I thought about Ray often, about the life he deserved but was never given. And I knew that my sacrifice every lonely night, every quiet day, was a small shield for him, a way to keep his memory alive in a world that tried to erase him. That thought gave me something to hold on to when the darkness pressed in. It's strange, you know, how pain can both break you and build you. How loss leaves a space that nothing else can fill, but also carves out room for something new, a deeper kind of love, a quiet wisdom. I wasn't the girl I once was. I was a woman shaped by loss, by silence, by the fierce love that never fades even when the world turns its back. And so I lived not in happiness, but in acceptance. Not in joy, but in peace with the truth I carried. Sometimes, I'd think back to those days with a bittersweet ache, grateful for the strength I found, but mourning all the things that could have been. That's how life went on. Slow, steady, sometimes lonely, but always forward. Because that's what you do when you've loved someone so deeply, you keep going, carrying them in your heart, letting their light guide you through the dark. Land sakes alive, I thought those days of heavy silence would never end. But sometimes, life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it, like the first faint glimmer of dawn after a long, dark night. For the longest time, I was just moving through the motions, feeling like a shadow trapped in a house full of memories. But then, something changed. Something small, almost unnoticed, but enough to stir a flicker of hope in my heart. It happened one afternoon in the spring of '62. I was at church, sitting quietly in the back pew as Mama's choir sang their hymns, when I noticed a woman standing by herself near the altar. She looked lost, like she didn't quite belong, and something about her reminded me of myself, that feeling of being on the outside, carrying a burden no one understood. I don't know what came over me, but I walked over and offered her a smile, and then a kind word. That simple act of reaching out, well, it shook something loose inside me. Because in that moment, I realized I still had love to give. Not just the fierce, protective love I carried for Ray, but a softer, gentler kind. The kind that reaches out to others, even when your own heart feels broken. It reminded me of what Mama always said, kindness is the glue that holds us all together. From that day, I started looking for little ways to help around town. I volunteered at the community center, helped with the Sunday school, even baked pies for the church bake sales. Nothing big, nothing heroic, just small acts that made the days a little brighter. And slowly, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. Frank noticed it too. He'd come home from his radio job and find me humming in the kitchen or chatting with the neighbors on the porch. We still lived quiet lives, yes, but there was a new warmth between us, a silent understanding that even in the hardest times, we could find moments of grace. I won't say we ever fell in love like the stories in the movies, but there was respect and there was companionship. Sometimes, that's enough. Most of all, I started to forgive myself. For the choices I'd made, for the sacrifices, for the years spent hiding in the shadows. I saw now that what I did, marrying Frank, keeping Ray's secret, was a kind of love too. A love that protected, that held steady when everything else was falling apart. And with that forgiveness came a new kind of strength. A quiet confidence that no matter what the world threw my way, I could face it. That I was more than my past, more than the pain and the loss. I was still here, still standing. I won't lie, some days were hard. Some nights, the old fears crept back in, and the memories whispered in the dark. But I learned to lean on my faith, on the community that slowly became my family, and on the small joys, a blooming rose bush on the porch, the laughter of children playing in the street, the smell of fresh bread baking in the oven. Life gave me a second chance, not a grand one, but a real one. A chance to live with purpose, to love in new ways, and to find peace in the quiet moments. And that, my dear, is something worth holding on to. So, if you're listening and you're carrying a heavy heart like I once did, know this. Sometimes, the smallest step forward is the bravest thing you can take. And sometimes, hope comes in the form of a simple smile, a helping hand, or a soft hymn sung on a Sunday afternoon. You know, it took me a long time, many years to come to this place. To sit quietly with my memories and say out loud, yes, this was my life. This was my truth. I carried that secret in my heart like a heavy stone, and for the longest time, it weighed me down so much I thought it might break me. But one day, I realized that holding on to the pain wasn't helping anyone. Not Ray, not Frank, not me. That day, I sat on the porch with a box in my lap. Inside were letters, photographs, little reminders of a life I'd tried to forget, wedding invitations I never wanted, old bills from the hospital, even a faded piece of lace from my dress. I looked at each thing slowly, breathing in the past and feeling the years pour through me like a river. And then I made a choice. I chose to let go. Not because the past didn't matter, oh no, it mattered more than anything, but because I was done living in its shadow. Done carrying that stone in my heart when it was time to set it down. I tore up those letters, said a prayer for each memory, and let the wind take them away. It was like saying goodbye to a part of myself I loved, but had to leave behind. I remember feeling tears stream down my cheeks, not from sadness this time, but from a deep, cleansing kind of release. Like the sky opening after a long, hard rain. I whispered to myself, Jeannie, you're free now. Free to live your life, without bitterness, without regret. And you know what? That choice changed everything. It was like waking up from a long, restless sleep. I saw the world and myself with new eyes. I understood that my story wasn't just one of sacrifice and loss. It was also one of courage, of quiet strength, of love that didn't always look the way the world expected. I chose to live without pretending, without carrying the heavy burdens that weren't mine alone. I learned to forgive my family, myself, the world that didn't understand. Because forgiveness is what heals. It's what lets you find peace in the middle of the storm. That day, I didn't just let go of old things, I embraced a new way of being. I embraced hope. I embraced the future, even if it was uncertain. I embraced the truth that life, with all its twists and turns, is still a beautiful gift. So, if you're holding on to something painful today, something that's been dragging you down, I want you to know that it's okay to let it go. It's okay to choose yourself, to choose peace, to say, like I did, I'll live on, no apologies, no regrets. Just forward. Because that's the power we all have, my dear. The power to write new chapters, to heal old wounds, and to love ourselves fiercely along the way. And that's the story I carry with me now. You know, looking back on all those years, the quiet struggles, the hidden secrets, the love and the loss, I've come to realize something that's been sitting with me for a long time. It's not the kind of lesson you find in books or sermons, but it's real, and it's hard-earned. It's this. Life don't always give you the story you think you'll have. Sometimes it throws you curveballs that change everything. And sometimes, the love you think you need isn't the love that saves you. Back then, I believed that keeping our secret was the only way to protect my brother, to protect our family. And maybe it was. But I also learned that living behind a mask, no matter how noble the cause, takes its toll. It can leave you feeling lonely, even when you're surrounded by people. It can make you question who you really are, and whether the life you're living is truly yours. But here's the thing, through all the pain and the silence, I found a kind of strength I never knew I had. I found out that love is bigger than just what you see on the surface. It's the quiet sacrifices, the daily acts of courage, the way you keep going even when the road gets dark. And that kind of love, my dear, is worth everything. I also learned that forgiveness, for yourself, for others, for the world, is what sets you free. Holding on to bitterness only keeps you chained to the past. It's okay to let go. It's okay to choose peace. That doesn't mean forgetting or pretending things were easy. It means accepting that life is complicated and that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight inside ourselves. Maybe most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to find your own truth. To live authentically, even if it's just in small ways. To tell your story when the time is right. I waited many years before I told my granddaughter about Ray, about what we went through. And when I did, it felt like a weight lifted off my heart, like passing a torch, so she wouldn't have to carry the same burdens in silence. So, if there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Don't wait too long. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the right person to accept you. Life's too short for that kind of waiting. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to start living your truth today, even if it's just a little bit at a time. You young folks have a chance we never had. You can build a world where love is love, and secrets don't have to be prisons. But that starts with being honest with yourself. With loving yourself fiercely, flaws and all. With letting go of the fear that keeps you small. Remember, it's the love you give to others and to yourself that defines your story. Not the hardships or the secrets, but the courage to keep moving forward. That's the heart of it all. So maybe, just maybe, it's time for you to stop waiting. Time to step out into the light with all your scars and all your beauty. Time to tell your story, because your truth matters. And you, my dear, are worth it. Well, now, we've walked a long road together, haven't we? I hope you felt what I felt, the weight of secrets, the ache of love, the strength it takes to carry a burden not your own. I hope you've seen the quiet courage that sometimes lives in the smallest acts, in the softest words. Because that's the story I wanted to tell you tonight. Not just about the past, but about how those days still ripple through the years, through the lives we live today. You see, this story isn't just mine. It belongs to all of us who have ever had to hide parts of ourselves to be loved, to be safe, to survive. It's about the price of silence and the power of truth. It's about love, the kind that bends and twists but never breaks. And it's about hope, that even when the world seems cold and unforgiving, there's still a place for kindness, for forgiveness, for second chances. I want you to hold that in your heart, wherever you are right now, because maybe you're carrying a secret too. Maybe you're hiding who you are or what you believe because you're afraid of what might happen if you don't. And honey, I want you to know, you're not alone. Not now, not ever. So here's what I'm going to ask you. Do you believe that true love, the kind that lives in the heart and soul, should always find its way back? That no matter the distance, the years, or the pain, real love remembers. Sometimes, I think about Ray and me standing at that altar, holding hands, but not quite touching. And I wonder, does he remember it too? Does he remember the promise, the love, the sacrifice? Sometimes on quiet nights, when the wind rustles through the trees and the stars shine bright over Arkansas, I swear I feel him near. Like he's watching over me, proud and free. And maybe, just maybe, that love we shared, in all its imperfect glory, is still alive in some way I can't explain. Life is full of mysteries like that, isn't it? And maybe the greatest one of all is love, how it can hurt and heal, break and build, bind us together even when we're apart. I want you to carry the story with you, not as a weight, but as a light. A reminder that every life holds stories worth telling, that every heart has a strength you might not yet know you possess, and that love, in all its forms, is the greatest gift we have. Thank you for listening to my story, for sitting with me on this porch of memories. And if you ever find yourself wondering what love truly means, I hope you'll remember this. It's not always easy, it's not always pretty, but it's always worth it. Now, before we part, I want to leave you with one last thought, one question to hold close when the day is done and the world gets quiet. Do you believe that love, the real kind, always finds its way back home? I'll be thinking about that tonight. And maybe, just maybe, so will you.